Welcome everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is one I'm super excited about, and it's about how to use Deen to cope with life. Listen, so often I will hear people say something along the lines of everybody needs therapy, everybody needs to go and see a therapist. And I, despite being a trauma coach, vehemently disagree with that because I think that the almost medicalization of just getting through everyday life and assuming that every single person needs a qualified licensed professional to help them get through life is something that came not as a result of our own struggles, but rather as a disconnect overall from seeking other methods of coping and then using the professionals when we need them, when we've kind of exhausted or tried our best with what we have, and we're realizing that it's not working, things are getting worse, or they're just accelerating in a way that we are not able to handle by ourselves. Our Deen is incredible, it truly is, and I do so much work around this because I found, and I find, like many of you guys find, that the frameworks that we're given in our religion literally help you through every scenario and situation that you can have. We have a robust Deen, subhanallah. Whether we are talking about, certain rulings around how to marry two people, what to do with inheritance, how to operate a funeral, or talking about how to deal with grief, how to deal with hardship, how to demonstrate gratitude. Everything can be found in our Deen. And so when we recognize that we have that blueprint, we are going to be able to tackle things in a way that we wouldn't even think. And I think as Muslims, sometimes we become desensitized to just the incredible gift, blessing, rahmah from God that our religion is. And when we reconnect to that, when we really tell ourselves and remind ourselves, hey, this is actually something that can help me navigate every aspect of my life, there's a certain power that comes with it, something that we might have overlooked, but we can take that power back. And this video is going to be completely unedited. I just want to get it out for you guys, but I'm actually going to be using one of my favorite ahadith to help break down these concepts of how to use the Deen to mentally cope. But before that, if you are new here, Assalamu alaikum, my name is Hannah. I am a PA with a degree in medicine. I'm a trauma coach for Muslim women and a high impact self improvement coach. If you're a Muslim woman who is dealing with trauma, you're ready to take back your life, go to the link in my description and check it out, inshallah. You guys are hopefully going to find some really beneficial information there. There is a compilation by Imam Nawawi of several hadith. Some of you guys might be familiar with it. But the 19th hadith of the 40 hadith he compiled is one that is so powerful when it comes to just how to look at life, how to deal with things, how to deal with hard times. You are going to come upon hard times. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, do you think that you will be left to say, I believe and not be tested? It is a reality. Whether you are tested with good or whether you are tested with hardship, you are going to be tested. That is the reality of this life. When we can accept that as the reality, then inshallah, when those challenges come upon us, we're not so surprised. And so let's read this hadith, and inshallah, I'll try to remember to put it in the description as well. Abu al-Abbas, Abdullah bin Abbas, radiallahu anhuma, reported, one day I was behind the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said to me, O young man, I shall teach you some words of advice. Be mindful of Allah and Allah will protect you. Be mindful of Allah and you will find Him in front of you. If you have need to ask, ask of Allah. And if you seek help from Allah. Know that even if the nation or the whole community were to gather together to benefit you with something, they would not benefit you with anything except that which Allah has already decreed for you, recorded for you. And that if they gather together to harm you with something, they would not be able to harm you with anything except that which Allah has already recorded against you. The pens have been lifted and the pages have dried. Let's give a little bit of context here, right? So within this hadith, and I sometimes feel like when we talk about this hadith, there's so much that is overlooked because it really is a powerful way to look at Islamic psychology. It's not just this beautiful moment between the Prophet ﷺ and Abdullah ibn Abbas. It is an actual textbook in and of itself of how to deal with things from an Islamically influenced psychological perspective. So let's start off with the first point. And how do you cope? The first thing to know of how to cope with things, hard times as a Muslim, is remember you're not alone. Loneliness is a poison. It truly is a poison. And if you don't believe me, then please know that there are actually literally certain molecules in our body called tachykinins, which flare up and cause an inflammatory response in our body when we are secluded, when we are in social isolation, when we are disconnected to people. Still don't believe me? Think about what happened when the entire world shut down, when we were isolated, where many of us weren't allowed to leave our own homes to connect with people. How difficult that was, and the fact that mental illness rates have spiked across the board, no matter what kind of situation you're talking about, whether it's alcoholism or suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, all spiked after those years of social isolation. Not a coincidence. Now, here's the thing. Is it not so incredible to think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it so clear to us that He is constantly connected to us? I want you to think about this from just like a perspective of realize that there exists an entire theory. Obviously, as Muslims, we don't subscribe to this theory, but there are people who believe in God. They believe there's a creator of the heavens and the earth and the universe, but they believe that He is disconnected. He doesn't care about the little things that are happening. God does not entertain himself with the happenings of people on earth. Whereas we come from a tradition that says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Almighty, the creator of everything we see and everything that we don't see. And yet, despite the greatness, right, despite the incredible might and power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He still makes it a point to build closeness with us, subhanallah. In the verse from the Quran, Allah is closer to us than our jugular vein. The beautiful reminder in the Quran, إذا سأل عبادي عني فإني قريب أجيب دعوة الداعي إذا دعاني. If my servant asks about me, I am near. I answer the call of the caller when he or she calls, right? This is a reminder to us that you're actually never alone. So even in isolation, and sometimes it's we isolate ourselves as a coping mechanism, and again, not a very healthy coping mechanism, but sometimes we do it to ourselves. Sometimes we are isolated by other people. Sometimes we're in a season of hardship in our lives and we're not being treated well, and we have to disconnect from people, or people are disconnecting from us, and it can feel really, really difficult. I think about seasons in my life where I experienced that feeling. How do you cope with that feeling? Coping is not about resolution, it is about getting through the hardship. You remind yourself that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always with you. And I'm going to give you a trick to help really solidify this. I want you to start thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a friend. I want you to start thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as one that you go to when you have hard times, and like you really build a trusting relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The incredible thing about that, the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never leaves. It's either us, we either come closer to him or we distance ourselves from him, but he never leaves. And so when you take that and you really, really hone into it, you're going to find another level of connection that is going to leave you fulfilled, where you can be alone, you can be on your own, you can be, if there's a season of hardship in your life that is keeping you away from people, whatever it might be. Maybe you're someone who's trying to get married and you're finding it really hard and you really want that connection with someone. As an example, maybe you're having a hard time making friends, or you moved somewhere new and you don't know anyone. Lean on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as your friend. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually describes Ibrahim alayhi salam as a friend of his. So know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants that connection with us. So hone in on that, so you're not allowing loneliness to consume you. That's first and foremost one thing that I want to mention. Now, continuing with this just incredible hadith, right? There's this reminder of us to be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the thing about the world we live in and the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created it is we understand that there's like the physical aspect of the world. It is what we can see, feel, smell. We can measure certain aspects of it. But then there is a metaphysical aspect. In Muslims, we believe in the metaphysical aspect, things that are outside of our sight, and we can't hold it in our hands, we can't smell it, right? You can't see the angels, but we believe that there's an angel, uh, angels that are documenting our deeds. You can't see the jinn, but we believe in their existence clearly, except for those who might have had paranormal experiences. We can't see the ruh, we can't see our own soul, but we recognize that we have a soul. And in fact, so many non-Muslims recognize this reality, right? So when the Prophet ﷺ is giving Abdullah ibn Abbas the advice of being mindful of Allah and Allah will protect you, it's a reminder that there are certain happenings that happen in the background, in the metaphysical world. And by virtue of us maintaining taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, maintaining mindfulness, remembering Allah is watching, remembering that when we are doing something that might be sinful, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not pleased with it, when we cater our actions in our being, in the way we walk through life, and allow it to line up with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for us, then the metaphysical world starts to bend to us in a sense, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is rewarding us for that, right? Both in the dunya and the akhirah, we get to experience the blessings of that. And so coping with hardship is recognizing that even though things might be difficult now, I'm going to continue to maintain mindfulness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because I want the reward to stack for me. And it might be that there are things that are happening in the metaphysical world that I don't even recognize. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is protecting me from something. As an example, we know that one of the ahadith about dua, one of the ways Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers dua is He actually removes a calamity that was destined for us, right? That is actually one of the ways that He answers dua. So we might have made dua for something and we're like, it's a thing that we think is going to pull us out of this hard time that we're in. But Allah doesn't answer the dua in the way that, or by giving us what we ask for, but He removes the calamity instead. Isn't that not an incredible way to shift your perspective, to imagine that, yes, I'm praying for something and I'm in difficulty, but it might just be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is shifting the metaphysical world so as to protect me from sometimes even my own self. And how comforting is that? How incredible of a coping mechanism is that, right? Where you can recognize that no matter what you experience, left or right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to protect you. He wants good for you, right? That's another way that we can use our deen to remind ourselves to cope in a healthy way that is mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now here's a really powerful way. If you seek help from Allah. You know that I'm super big on action, taking action. If you watch this channel, if you're a subscriber to the channel, if you are any of my clients who are watching this, then you understand that I do not excuse people from taking action. The reality of it is that there are things that are in our locus of control. There are things that we can do something about at any given time. And any time we decide to relinquish that control, nothing is going to move. We are not going to shift except for by some miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we don't sit there and rely on it. We have to take action. And one of the most darndest things we have ever thought of as a community is to believe that dua is not actions. Sometimes you'll be told in hardship, someone says, oh, just make dua, and you're like, I need like actual advice. Don't tell me to make dua. That is actual advice. That is the most powerful advice someone can give you. Make dua. Why? Because it's not just this spiritual hippy dippy thing that you do. It is quite literally you consulting and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who maintains the power of the entire universe, you asking Him for His intervention. It is like me, as an example. This is a crude example, as none can be compared to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but I just want to give you an example. Let's say I'm working at a really big company and I need to take 2 days off because I have a certain family commitment that I need to make. And my manager, who makes the schedule, is not giving me off. Nobody's picking up and taking over my days. And I know that the CEO has an open door policy and that the CEO is just the nicest person. And anytime you walk in to request something from that CEO, they will make it happen and no, you will never get in trouble, right? And someone comes to me and they're like, why don't you just, the CEO has an open door policy, just walk in and ask, him or her if you can take those days off. And I say, I need actual advice. How silly is that? Knowing that if I literally go in and ask, he or she is going to say, yeah, take those 2 days off. I'll talk to the manager. You'll be fine. I won't get in trouble. I won't get fired. The manager won't be angry because it's her, it's her it's her boss that's telling her this. That would be super silly. Now imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who literally can do anything and everything for you, and you're just completely neglecting it. You're neglecting talking to Him. You're discounting this tool, this weapon you have of dua, and you're sitting here thinking, I'm making dua, I'm making dua, I'm not going to have it. I actually received an email from someone, and God bless her, because I'm sure she had good intentions, who had, was asking me to make dua for her. And she basically was like, I feel like I've been making dua for a year and it feels like the opposite is happening, and maybe Allah will listen to you. And I was like, listen, I'll make dua for you. But that's a mindset shift you got to make right now, because Allah is not going to listen to me more than he listens to you, or vice versa. Nobody knows who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has greater regard for. And so don't just ever make the assumption, and rather understand that there's actually a hadith. And let me pull it up. Actually, I'll literally pull up the email that I sent. Uh, Let me see here. The hadith was, every one of you will have his supplications answered as long as he is not impatient. He says, I have supplicated, but I was not answered. The moment you start thinking like, God's not answering my prayers, it's not happening, you basically blocked your own blessings, right? And so coping as a Muslim is understanding, I'm going to take action, and one of the actions I'm going to take is literally I'm going to go and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his intervention. Think of dua as that. Dua is calling out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's also asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his intervention. How powerful is that? Imagine like if you just thought about dua in that way. It's like, I remember when I shifted that idea, that concept of dua, it made me feel so empowered, and I started finally seeing like the answers to my dua coming about, because I was looking for them, because I recognized like, oh, I took the action. Now let me see like the actual effects of the action that I took, subhanallah. So use that. That is another way to cope very powerfully. And if you feel like I'm making dua, I'm making dua, I'm making dua, and it's not being answered, keep making dua. What do you have to lose if you make dua? On the day of judgment, when those duas come to you in the form of rewards at a time when you're terrified, you are going to wish that you went back to this earth and made more dua. So do not neglect it. And I understand, because I work with women who are struggling with trauma, chronic trauma, narcissistic abuse, childhood trauma, all of it. And I know how miserable it can feel, like I'm making dua, I'm making dua. You never know which door Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to open to you. How often have I had women, for example, who are working with me, and they said, Hannah, you are the answer, or your program. I don't want to, let's say you are the answer to my dua. I don't like taking that credit. The program is an answer to their dua, because they made dua and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened a door and said, okay, this is where you're going to learn the skills, or the tools that you need to heal from this trauma. And they might have been making dua for it for a very long time, but the reality is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew when it was best for them in their journey to receive that healing, and so he delivered it to them. Do not let go. Now let's continue on with the hadith, right? So we talked about mindfulness of Allah, and asking, if we're asking, seeking help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now we go on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet ﷺ goes on to explain that basically, regardless of what anybody wants or does for you, if there's harm that is going to come to you, or there's goodness that is going to come to you, once it reaches you, understand that there is divine wisdom in that. Okay, so understand this. Now, this is a bit of a nuanced topic to think about with qadr. I think we're very lazy about the way we think about qadr. We just think like something horrible happened, like that's a qadr of Allah, I just need to take it. But understand, if a person performs an action that is harmful to you, it doesn't mean that it was right for them to do it, or that like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically commanded them to do it. That's not what it is. Otherwise, they wouldn't be held accountable for their actions. They'll be held accountable. But understand that if harm does reach you, meaning whether you were oppressed by someone, whether just a really, difficult life circumstance hit you, whatever it might be, when you are now kind of arrested, or in that constraint, right? You're in that contraction, we kind of call it. You're there, know that is still good in there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of whatever needs to be taken care of if it came out of oppression or injustice towards you. And I say this again because I work with a lot of people, and I hear from a lot of people on my channel and on Instagram DMs of experiences they have. The pain that they're experiencing is because of someone else's oppression or injustice towards them. That's why I'm honing in on that example. But the point is really any hardship. It might be an illness that befell you. No one gave you that illness necessarily, right? But you're still experiencing it. There's khair in there. Look for the khair. Look for it and understand. Like, it's hard to say take it in stride, but do not relinquish the power that you have, to my sisters and my brothers who are watching this, to look for the quote unquote silver lining. This is something, actually, one of the first things that I teach my ladies in my trauma group coaching program, just as part of the subconscious healing side of things. There's very expansive path to healing trauma, but this is just one part, which is so often in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically is challenging us to gather evidence. Evidence for his existence, evidence of his mercy, evidence of just how, this world is going to come to an end. That evidence gathering aspect, when we lose the will to do it, we've disempowered ourselves, and we've actually stripped ourselves as of one of the tools that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically gave us to engage in healing work, right? In those hardships, you want to be able to say, okay, this is happening, but what am I grateful for? And I know, listen, I know, especially in a world where oftentimes we feel invalidated because of our struggles, and it can be really hard. I hear very often people are like, don't tell me, to look for the positive side. But I'd like to challenge that, and I'd like to ask you, did the Prophet ﷺ not tell us that patience is in the first strike of calamity? Is it just because the hardship that we are experiencing, just because it's happening, that all of a sudden all the other blessings that we have no longer matter or exist? What if Allah took away those blessings? What would happen then? Right? Do not lose yourself in the hardship so much so that you lend yourself to ingratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't be that worshiper. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it in Surah Al-Hajj, I believe, right? The one who worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on an edge, right? When everything is going well and they're happy and, content, they're grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're happy, they're joyful, they sing his praises, right? But when hardship strikes, all of a sudden, they can't handle it. They're just off, like, there's no good in their eyes. There's no good in this world in their eyes. That's not how it goes, right? So be very mindful. It's a mindset shift. If you are able to adopt that, I mean, studies show these are people who have lower rates of depression. They rank higher on happiness skills, although happiness is a very subjective thing to measure. They tend to have better health outcomes, physical and physiological health outcomes. Gratitude is not something to overlook. In just looking for the bright side in every situation, is difficult as it is. And those are the elements of the hadith that I really, really wanted to talk about. A few, there's so much, subhanAllah, that we can learn from Deen. So many gems. But adopting those mindset shifts is a really good place to start. There are even elements even that go beyond just our thinking or subconscious, that make our Deen such a powerful tool for navigating life. It is only the believer. There might be people who are gifted in this world, they experience good things in this world, but they don't have the akhirah. But it's a believer in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who Allah allows you to attain good in this world and secure the akhirah. You get the best of both worlds, quite literally. So take it. Do not ever take it for granted. And if you like this video, then please like and subscribe. And of course, for anyone who is looking to work with me, whether it is through one-on-one coaching, which is only available for a limited time, or the trauma group coaching program, don't hesitate. Don't wait. Please, my June cohort just booked out a month early before the application ended. Book your call, inshallah, in the link below and apply for the program. Assalamu alaikum, and I will see you guys next time.